Charlotte. Welcome back to Human and Holy. So excited for part 3 of 3, where we are exploring the ideas of Rabbi Yehudah Leib Ashlag in this book, Introduction to the Zohar. If anyone is hearing you for the first time, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
So I grew up in New York in, I would say, a typical traditional Reform family. Zionist, high holidays, strong Jewish identity, but religion was something that was separate from the overall perspective and framing of life that we took. So it was like a nice add-on, but it wasn't the main driving factor in goal orientation and the hierarchy of how to prioritize any pursuit. I climbed what I would say is the secular success ladder. I ended up at Harvard, which, many would hold as the pinnacle of higher learning, education, intellectual environments in America. I felt extremely intellectually stifled. I felt I had no opportunities to explore in a rigorous and free way a lot of the most fundamental ideas about our purpose, why we're here, what a good life looks like, where to find meaning. Not to mention, I would say, a hostility to Jewish civilization and ideas that was underlying the campus environment. I found my place, my home for my mind and these questions and my curiosity off campus with Mayor Rabbi Yoni Ganger and Rabbi Zarchi of Harvard Chabad. And it just sent me on a now 8-year journey, learning more and more and more about what Judaism has to say about what a meaningful, well-lived life looks like, what a healthy society looks like, what our goals should be for our world. And more and more and more, I would say, I've just shifted my consciousness to one where the Jewish ideas about how to orient oneself are front and center of everything that I do, as opposed to just being a nice little tack on for, a life transition or for some way to mark time or life cycle events. And I would say that in particular, I have a unique fascination with the intersection of mysticism and science and the ways in which they're actually one when we explore this underlying theme that we're all from source. Our goal is to understand the true nature of reality and use that understanding to uplift it. And the overlap between those goals in both mysticism and in our modern pursuits of science, technology, and just tracking how the Jewish narrative around progress maps onto developments in AI and rocket technology, all these things I just find so fascinating. So it's a pleasure to be here, as always, with you, Tonia.
I'm so happy to have you.
So fun to have you as someone to talk to about all of these fascinating topics.
Yeah, likewise. I so enjoy having you as a conversation buddy. And I have to say that I'm admiring that every time I've asked you to introduce yourself, I'm learning a little new nugget. It's actually hard to say it again and to tap into what you're feeling right now about your identity and what brings you here to this conversation. So it's been interesting to hear those slight shifts. And I also love the way that you kind of differentiate Judaism as something to mark time or life cycle events versus something that you see front and center as the main driver of how you see the world, how you see your own life, how you see society. It's a very different experience of your Judaism.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually would say I was talking about this with a friend yesterday. I think it's the core difference between, not to veer off topic, but I do think this is very relevant and interesting. When I was growing, I spent a lot of time, both in my campus environment, I studied comparative religion on campus, just because I became so interested in these ideas off campus. I was like, I might as well just spend time at the divinity school and learn what I can. And I took a course on Reform Judaism, the birth of Reform Judaism. I would say one of the core differences theologically between the Reform and conservative movements and what we would call, I don't like the term Orthodox. It's actually a Greek Christian word that was like slapped onto what I would like to call just Torah Judaism. Judaism as we've known it in the unbroken chain for the last however many years, since Sinai. A core difference is the idea in the belief of Moshiach and a Messianic reality. And so I think when I heard this concept for the first time with my Reform ears, it sounded a little bit like a, nice fairy tale, cute concept, but it's so sophisticated. And I think people don't realize how sophisticated it is. Built into the concept of Moshiach is, one, it's our purpose. It gives us but it gives us a lot of concepts of goalposts for how we should understand and measure our progress as a society. And it gives us the opportunity to believe in the possibility of a whole and complete, almost utopian vision, not just for the Jewish people, for the whole world. And we don't realize how much of our society is built on Jewish messianic ideals. A very easy one that I think we all ascribe to is the idea that we should aim to end illness and that we should heal everyone from all sickness and solve the root of all sickness. And the way I would describe it is this: if I'm just operating from like a purely rational, self-interested perspective, why would I care about your illness? Okay, it's sad, but it's not. If I don't view us as coming from the same source, then I don't see the point in healing you, not because of something to do with me, but just because you have inherent value as a human being. We take for granted all the layers of beliefs underlying the idea that we should try to eradicate illness. Another way to think about this is that when you go to medical school, you can train someone how to do a surgery. So you literally learn the mechanics, and almost anyone could learn the mechanics of how to, cut open the body and perform a surgery in the correct way. There's two levels above that. One being why you should do it in this way and not in that way. Well, if you cut here, you could pop this vein. Versus if you do it here, then this or that stays intact. All these details, which is different from just rote memorization of how to do something. And then there's the other underlying theme, which is, why is it even worthwhile to try to heal this person? Why is it worthwhile to cut this person open? Why shouldn't we just let nature take its course and this person dies of its natural cause? And there's so many underlying beliefs that have to go into learning the surgery to give it meaning. And I think that that's like the story in a lot of ways of what has happened to Reform and conservative Judaism, is that there's still mechanics of Jewish aesthetics. But when you take out the deeper goals and purpose to measure against why this is like a worthwhile pursuit, then the self-perpetuating factor just becomes guilt. And you see this because the way they describe the reason to do anything Jewish is lidor vador in a lot of times. It's one, ethics, and two, lidor vador. But what does lidor vador, generation to generation, really translate into is guilt. You should do this because your mom did it. Your mom should do it because her grandma did it. And then it just becomes this version of Judaism, which is looking backwards and it's not looking forwards. And when you're invigorated, I think we're all invigorated by a goal. Like that's like Shabbat is a mini version of this, is you have a feeling of a destination. When you're moving towards a destination, it just inspires. And so I think there's a way in which when you have this very big end goal for how the world should look, your Judaism it doesn't become, these are the Jewish things that I do, and then this is everything else. You then can see how everything else is a part of this mission, and it's real tikkun olam to bring this beautiful utopian reality to the world. And if you're not living that, what are you living? It's like nihilism or it's hedonism. Like I always think of in The Matrix, that one character who is just kind of like, let's just enjoy the simulation. And, as long as we're here, just eat the cake and have the beautiful girlfriend. And that it's very easy to fall into that if you don't have a vision of where we should be heading. So to me, that's like the missing key to how to just, I wouldn't even say change your perspective and have Judaism pervade your perspective in that sense, but more realize how Jewish your perspective is.
It's interesting that you highlight the Messianic vision as being something so central to the Jewish sense of purpose. I recently saw a viral clip of a Reform rabbi bemoaning the fact that religion, like that Judaism, has been infected by this Messianic fervor. I hadn't thought to differentiate that as being the difference, like the dividing line in the sand between the Reform movement and Torah Judaism. I also love how you said that. But that makes sense to me, that like when you strip Judaism of that internal purpose, the belief in this Messianic vision, the belief in Moshiach, is a core belief of Judaism. It's very deeply baked into
13 articles of faith.
Yeah.
Rambam.
He said it, not us. Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting to see, like, what does Judaism look like without that vision? Where are we headed? And if there's no sense of purpose, then, I mean, Shabbos has a mini taste of that Mashiach, as a feeling of the destination that we will experience when you're not defined by what you do, when you're able to just experience and revel in divine connection and with each other, is special to me, because I think that it takes it from just being this personal day of rest, which I know we all find rejuvenating, and it is that on one level, but on a deeper level, it's, to quote Jonathan Sachs, it's a dress rehearsal for
so good.
A full dress rehearsal. And actually, in the words of, what was his name who wrote the article? Someone wrote an article about it. But a full dress rehearsal for a time that has not yet come but will. Which I thought was like so beautiful, like a full dress rehearsal for that time. And to envision yourself, like when Shabbos descends, to say like, I'm stepping into a dress rehearsal for a time that's going to come where we're going to experience this presence with God, presence with each other, feeling our interconnectedness. It's also a time when we lean into our communities.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because ironically, even though he was conservative, brilliant Jewish thinker, is Abraham Joshua Heschel, The Sabbath.
Yeah.
That book made me want to be Shabbat observant. I wrote my thesis in college about that book.
Okay, what about it?
100 pages. I actually wrote about, this was in 2019, I wrote about the need for integration in broader society of Shabbat-like habits in the era of screen technology, and how screen technology created a new layer of need for Shabbat, because it's like a hyper version of our reality, like pulling on all of our dopaminergic, however many new things you could want here when you go to a store. Like imagine when you're like, you're scrolling and it's just like everything on steroids. So, and something he talks about in that work, to your point about the dress rehearsal, that I find so interesting is also this idea in which relationally, it changes your relationships for that 25-hour period, where you also get a chance to see others in that perfected state and live as though we're all our perfected selves, our whole selves, versus during the week when also through the lens of commerce and trade, you're relating to people often through this lens of what can I get out of this transaction versus just seeing the person as an end unto themselves. It's like Martin Buber, I, thou,
Right.
that whole, so good.
So good. We all strive to live that way, to be able to see people as a whole being. Today, we're going to be talking about some ideas from this book. Over the last two episodes on these concepts, we spoke about why people suffer, how to experience less resistance around our own, either like real suffering, but also like the existential suffering of the human being. And then in the second episode, we spoke about how human beings are born with this endless desire to receive. And then the work of our lives is to transform that into a desire to give, and then a desire also to receive, because God desires to give to us. So basically refining that natural human desire and channeling it for God. When we're talking about Moshiach and this perfected reality and this utopian vision, and it's always something that I feel very ready to ground, meaning like I like to really explore the pragmatic experience of like, what does Moshiach mean? What would that look like translated into our society? One of the core beliefs about the time of redemption is the idea that we're going to experience resurrection of the dead, that the dead will come back to life. And in this book, Rabbi Ashlag had a really interesting perspective on how we may experience that in our times. And I'd love for you to be the one to read it to us. Page 57. Go ahead.
The fourth stage is the service performed after the resurrection of the dead. The desire to receive, which will be completely eliminated through death and burial, is resurrected with the worst kind of exaggerated desire to receive. That is the secret of the dead are destined to be resurrected with their blemishes. People then transform the body through receiving in the form of giving, as discussed at length. There are rare individuals who perform this service even while living in this world.
That's something we really want to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
what does that mean to you?
First of all, the concept of the resurrection of the dead feels so foreign. It's another one of those ideas I would put in like the subcategory of things that aren't super present in Reform and Conservative Judaism about Moshiach, that just when you hear and interact with that idea for the first time feels very foreign.
Mm-hmm. And imaginative.
Imaginative, yes. Yeah. Like not of this world. Something
no. Delusional.
Yes.
Religious insanity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, I like to remind everyone and ground everyone in this idea that we believe in a Messianic reality here on earth. It's not some far off place we're going. It's about perfecting our reality here. And so we got to take it seriously. And I think to this idea of the dress rehearsal from Rabbi Sachs, which I love. I am going to use that now. That is such a fabulous idea. I think what he's discussing when he talks about these rare individuals who perform a resurrection of the dead in this world, a dress rehearsal, in modern language would be like an ego death, which I think is something that anyone who has any interaction with general spiritual, even new age world, very common theme that comes up again and again is the ego death. And I think it's very fascinating to see that it's right here in our ancient texts. It's some of our most ancient ideas, esoteric ideas, but it's present right here. And to me, what it brings up is just this idea of the necessity to experience brokenness, whether that's a brokenness that you choose to take on yourself or a brokenness that Hashem puts before you in order to engage on a deeper level with the soul. And in that sense, transform that desire to receive into this desire to give. And I think it's a theme also, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, that is very present in Chassidut, this idea of the descent for the sake of the ascent. And that's a little bit on a micro level how I think he's describing this idea of the resurrection of the dead. That's the ultimate descent for the sake of an ascent. And so I think every time, to me, that we view these mini deaths of our identity as a time where we can ascend even higher to a more perfected state, it's a miniature version of this concept of the resurrection of the dead. That's how I read this.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to hear, I feel like the Hasidic texts have so much to say about that idea.
Oh, 100%. First of all, I love the way that you described it, how you worded that. I also think that the ego death, or this concept of death and rebirth, not always, or very often, not being a descent that you necessarily choose, meaning a lot of people experience this death of their identity not by their own choosing, meaning it's not just this like innocent, beautiful path to enlightenment. Like, very often people experience this ego death, or this like death of their own identity and selves through crisis in their life, like a financial crisis or something within their family, or some time in their life where they are forced to shed a certain part of who they were and to be reborn into something new. And so back to that point that we discussed about suffering and the idea of resisting our suffering, because we experience suffering as bad. But to recognize how sometimes the challenges of our lives are pushing us to let go of old identities that are less true and intrinsic to who we are. And if we want to become a channel for God in this world, which I know that's like my wish for my lifetime, you have to surrender to those deaths, and you have to embrace the opportunity, because we can hold on so tight to a past self or a past life or a past circumstance, but we're constantly being initiated into a new, not constantly, but at certain junctures in our life, we're being initiated into a new world. And those are opportunities to say, I will choose to be reborn. I will see this as my resurrection as opposed to my end. And that response to suffering is one that can really transform us, because all of us are going to interact with suffering on some level. We will touch the edge of our own identities. We will have to discard parts of ourselves. And that could fill us with a lot of resentment and a sense of victimhood over the course of our lives as we interact with so many different struggles. Or it could make us more and more empowered to recreate ourselves, to be reborn, to become wider and more expanded vessels for this divine light that we want to channel.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it is it's specifically about releasing attachments. The idea that you need something outside of yourself to be whole and perfected. Because if you really take this idea very seriously, that your soul is a node of the source, then it's already perfect. And it's just about understanding that while it's good to engage positively with our world, that's something we're commanded to do, we don't need anything in order to be perfected. The perfecting comes through the release in some sense, and letting go. And it's a very different, this is again one of those shifts where it's just very different from the secular world that I was coming from, which is just like accolades, wealth, status, titles, all these things are some things that you add on to your identity to make it more complete. You're more of a complete person once you have this or that and this and that. And obviously we should still want to be people who achieve and do things, but there has to be an underlying understanding that you're already whole. And that when you need something to define you, that's the greatest downfall. Like it's good to have these things. We should create vessels to hold these things, but the second you need it, that's a sign that you don't have the vessel to actually hold on to it in a productive way.
Yeah. You know what's coming to mind is how when you are teaching and you prepare a lesson to give over, I just experienced this last night at my Tonia class. When a question comes through, it usually makes space for wisdom that is beyond you, because you didn't think it through. I mean, like, hopefully you have like contextual knowledge of the subject, but you didn't think it through. You have to surrender in that moment to whatever comes out of your mouth, literally. Like, what does this awaken within me? What's my instinctive, intuitive response?
The ruach.
Yeah, like literally the spirit.
Yeah.
And I really feel that it's like, in those moments, you become a channel for God in a way that when you are more like in control, like you know what you're going to teach and you know the topics you're going to cover, you don't know what someone's going to ask you. In those moments, you're forced to open yourself up, to let go of your attachment, even to the subject itself, to what you want to give over, to what you think is the important information in this text that you have chosen and selected to give. And you have to just lose your attachment to your own curated lesson. And through that, I find that often the most impactful wisdom comes through. And I genuinely believe that it's because in those moments that you become a clearer channel for God.
Yeah.
You are no longer like, maneuvering God's wisdom. You're like, you're open. And that's, and so the reason why that came to mind is because when you spoke about how we still of course want to achieve and whatever, but why are we achieving? Are we achieving because we're like adding things onto our identity? The fear that if I become a pure channel for God where I don't have these strong attachments to my identity, I will stop wanting to achieve is a disbelief in how strong the creative power of our souls are, where if we enter into that channel and flow, we will actually start to create and achieve on a much higher level, in the physical world. Like, I think we will be able to show up with and give so much more, meaning that those achievements that we're seeking will come through way more powerfully because we're sharing divine energy. We are not so attached to how it has to be in those, when we have like a roadmap to like our own career success or any type of success, versus when you're just like, God, lead me. And there's like an enormous creative power in our souls that I think naturally comes through in those moments.
It's like that idea that like the person who chases honor will run away.
Yeah.
This resonates with me so much on like a practical tool that I use, because I do think what you're saying is completely right, that the best creativity, the best ideas come from when you're a co-creator with God, is just to say, I'm not doing whatever endeavor this is for me. I'm doing it to reveal God. That completely changes the tone of whatever. That's being a giver. That's being a channel. That's not doing something for the sake of receiving it. It's like exactly back to Ashlag. When you're just doing something so that you can get whatever it is, honor, money, it's a very different tone from those things being a byproduct of your desire to reveal God in this world. And by revealing him, making the world a better place. And then you're rewarded by, of course, by our system with the honor and the money. Like, these are things that come to you when you're acting in this state of alignment. So I think it's a really powerful idea. Another way in which I think that the concept of the ego death and the resurrection of the dead comes into our lives in a very profound and marked way is motherhood. I felt like for me, I didn't really acknowledge it at the time, but when I look back, and there is this concept called matrescence, which is like the idea that your brain undergoes complete biological changes the same as it would in adolescence, in that shift from childhood into adulthood, when you go from a maiden to a mother, that are permanent, lifelong neurological changes. And this is like very clear with lots of evidence that this is the case. To me, that's a mini version of the resurrection of the dead, because in order for that new part of you to emerge, there are parts that you have to give up. But again, it's in the sake of being a giver. Like when you're a parent, you're in that ultimate state of giving.
Yeah.
And so I think in a lot of ways, that experience is in of itself a mini dress rehearsal. And by the way, even if you're not a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're someone that's a leader, you're experiencing this in some sense, where if you are going to take on the responsibility of shepherding others in their growth, it requires a movement away from that selfishness. Then it's about the other person. Your measure of success is what you gave over. It's not something that you've now tacked on to yourself.
Yeah.
Very different.
First of all, you bringing in motherhood is beautiful. I think that motherhood, I mean, there's that one great ego death for many people and with the first birth or pregnancy or whatever it is. But then there's also the continuous one as our children develop and bring out new parts of us. What's coming to mind is the Hasidic idea of yesh ayin yesh, which is that in order to move from like one existence to another existence, there has to be this period of decay. And if something, and the example that's given is that a seed first has to unravel, literally like disintegrate in the ground in order to blossom. And we experience that within our own identities, like literally the decay of ourselves, that complete unraveling. In order to move, as you said, into this completely new role of mother, or wherever we are transitioning in our lives, where it feels really like takes a lot out of us, or when we're forced to just shift the way we view ourselves, there's first that period of nothingness. And that darkness, that decay, that unraveling, that is something to, I think like through the process of life, I've started, obviously it doesn't make it easy to experience, but even just maintaining a little bit perspective of like something good is coming through.
Yes.
And
100%.
This unraveling, as extremely uncomfortable it is, and like, thank you to friends and family for supporting me through them and everything, still it's like, you kind of get this sense of like, I wonder what's coming next.
Yeah.
Because you start to learn that like, oh, the unraveling happens before the birth.
Yes. It's
the rebirth. The resurrection.
It's totally true. It's totally true. And there's also a version, I was talking about this yesterday with Rabbi Gerst. There's a version of this Messianic reality, specifically as it relates to this idea, where there is a comfort in feeling and knowing that descent for the sake of the ascent is taking place in a chain that's greater than your own immediate lifetime. And this is something that you feel in the most visceral way with parenthood, where sometimes there are challenges that are not resolved in your lifetime. And it's like this idea of like intergenerational healing, where something happened in your family line and you're the person that over the course of different lifetimes within your family is able to heal it. This idea gives me a lot of peace when I think about tragedy that's beyond rational human understanding or explanation, is that certain things take a greater time scale to heal than one that we can viscerally see and feel and hear in our own physical experience. And motherhood, to me, has been a mini taste of that, where there are things, and I'm very blessed. I had a very beautiful childhood. I have amazing parents. But inevitably, I think everyone naturally will come to motherhood with some version of, I want to give my child X, Y, or Z experience that I wasn't able to have. And there's a pleasure in giving it over, even if you yourself weren't able to have that experience. And it's okay. There's a healing in knowing that you're setting your child up for not only their own lifetime, but then also you think about your grandkids and your great grandkids, that there's some kind of like a resolution that you're offering. And it's okay that in your life, it's not something that you in your own span get to solve, but you're planting those seeds into the future.
Oh, I love that.
It's just when life is only up to your immediate death And I think this really does connect in a lot of ways to the broader problems around childlessness in actually literally every modernized society besides Israel, is that you don't get this sense of there being a greater timescale. And it's something that also this idea of Moshiach offers that can take you off the hedonic nihilistic treadmill, is just the idea that we're not operating a society for the immediate gratification of the people living here right now. We're operating society for the sake of future generations. That's a concept that's built into the belief that we are heading towards a future utopian vision. And it creates like a deeper level of acceptance when things don't go our way.
Yeah. You describing that resolution that you get to experience and how you choose to show up in your life and for your children, I think is also a really beautiful link between this future vision that we're describing with the past and with our heritage. The idea that we right now are standing in between past and future. And so like we are in conversation with the Torah is an ancient text. And I like say it in quotes because like I really believe that the Torah is right now.
Yes.
But it is an ancient text also. It's a historical text. And it is something that we've been connected to and living with for years. And the development of Jewish law and all Jewish thought really is like every generation being in conversation with past authorities and past scholars. And then carrying that forward towards a vision for something even better, even brighter, even more luminous, even more illuminated, especially because of the destruction of the temple and we don't live in the Holy Land of Israel and so on. And that's like what we're moving towards, is that rebuilding of the third temple. But I think that that's a very interesting position to be in, when not only is my life not just my life and not just limited to my lifetime, but I'm actually part of this great chain of existence, and that I am being trusted with an enormous legacy, and not just to hold and carry this legacy from generation to generation so it doesn't get lost, just transmit it, but to carry it forward to some type of resolution and brighter and more illuminated future for all of society. So like I hold a legacy that pushes me forward, which I think is the most empowering space to be in.
It's so interesting what you're bringing up, because it's like the other side of the guilt. It's the antidote to the guilt of doing something for the sake of those who came before you, is to look forward and see that you're building into the future. I couldn't agree with you more. It's very meaningful. Like there's a meaning. It's kind of, to me, it completes the idea when we say, isn't it beautiful that the Jewish people have been around for this long? And, that's why it's so great. Like we've outlived all these other people. It's like, yes, and. So there's this concept called the Lindy effect, which is that the longer that something's existed, the more likely it is to continue to exist into the future. And so I think you can use that idea to, in some sense, perpetuate Judaism from this place of guilt, where the tone is, we've already kept it up for so long, might as well just keep pushing through, versus, oh, these are ideas that have been so successful and proven themselves to be true by living them, that we would be at a loss to not continue to perpetuate those ideas into the future. And in fact, we fall off track when we abandon these ideas. Very different tone. And I think it actually connects to the second theme we wanted to discuss, which is how we examine the veracity of the Zohar. And Ashlag, if you want, we can go to the page. He discusses this idea of how we measure the truth of the Zohar and how we understand its author and the role of its place just as a text. So I think that was on page...
Speaking personally, from the day the light of God enabled me to begin to study the sacred book, I never considered researching its author for one simple reason. The content of the book itself testifies to the prominence of the Tana Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is greater even than all the other holy Tanaim. If I were to be convinced that the Zohar was authored by someone else, such as Rabbi Moshe de Leon or the like, I would simply come to the conclusion that that person, Rabbi Moshe de Leon, is greater than all of the holy Tanaim, including Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Indeed, the book is so deep and wise that evidence that it was written by one of the 48 prophets would make more sense than attributing it to one of the Tanaim. Moreover, if I became convinced that Moses himself received the Zohar on Mount Sinai from God himself, I would be satisfied. This book is worthy of that. Once I was able to prepare this accessible commentary, enabling people to understand what the Zohar says, I no longer feel any obligation to investigate the identity of the author. I think this is a very interesting idea, which is the idea of testing ideas for themselves as opposed to being obsessed and fixated by its author. I think this is a larger question about the Torah as well. People become really fixated on coming up with historical proofs for Mount Sinai and exactly how and where things happened, like proving its legitimacy through historical records or archaeological digs. I've never related to that way of proving the Torah's eternal value and truth. If the ideas speak for themselves, if the ideas are clearly eternal, then in his mind, do we need to know who the author was? Clearly the author was a great sage because these words are so eternal.
Yeah.
What comes up for you around it?
It's really interesting. Someone made this point to me and I was fascinated by it, which is that in the world of Jewish outreach, trying to help more secular Jews discover their Judaism, the proof-based methods of proving Torah are actually much less successful than just showing the beautiful ideas of Torah and kind of showing how the progress of our society, to me, this is what hit, showing how the progress of our society is a testament to the ideas of Torah. And that when things are going wrong, it's because we are veering off the ideas of Torah. That's a measure of general societal health. And I don't just mean for the Jewish people. I mean in the sense that a Torah is a revelation for the whole world. Our goal is to create a perfected state for the whole world. There are specific laws, the Noahide laws, that are given to the whole world, and that there's an aim for all of us, and that it's a we have also the Abrahamic faiths that use this similar yardstick of measurement from our book of what does it mean to shape a healthy individual, a healthy community, a healthy society. And when you examine the problems that are highlighted and most prevalent for a lot of the broader country and our globe, so many things could be remedied by Torah concepts. And to me, that was just that in of itself was the only proof that I needed. I enjoy on a personal level, out of curiosity, the historical components. I do think there's a value to exploring it, obviously, but I don't think just because something happened means that we can morally assess it in some way. Like, things happen all the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that point is important, that like there may be significance and pleasure in researching its historical context, but is that truly what compels a person to be connected to this wisdom?
Yes.
I've yet to meet someone who said those archaeological digs is what convinced me to be connected to Torah Judaism.
Yes. I would actually also, I'm going to separate things like archaeological digs from the idea that through studying God's creation, you come to this deeper appreciation of his wisdom and the ways in which our spiritual concepts are reflected in the way that nature and human beings and society is built. Like, I think there's a unique merit, and Rambam discusses this in his Introduction to Guide for the Perplexed, in just coming to a greater appreciation of God by examining his creation. I view that as separate from like trying to like create some kind of like a historical. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, two completely different things. I think
Yes.
like a general education about the universe and seeing how Jewish wisdom shows up too in those spaces and how it corroborates it is very different to me than proving that the Torah was given at Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like I've read a lot of those things or like watched things about it. And it always like makes me laugh a little bit. It feels like you have something to prove.
I completely agree. It feels insecure almost. Like the fact that we exist is not because of the event of Sinai. It's because we were given the Torah, and it's through the wisdom of the Torah. It's not through the event at Sinai. It's through the wisdom of the Torah that we exist and continue to exist.
And also that I really think of faith as being the choice to believe.
Yes.
Meaning like I see faith. I know a lot of people, there's two different ways of defining faith. Obviously there's many ways, but two ways according to like how I'm going to describe it right now. One way is I believe it's true because it is essentially true. And another is I choose to believe that it is true. I choose to believe that it is essentially true, which I think is a lot more honest to the human experience and is also very much the way that I see it defined within Torah and like through many of our sages and ancestors and patriarchs and matriarchs, which is this choice to believe in the construct of faith.
There's also a way in which there are a lot of truths, religion aside, that we know about that we don't choose to live by. Like I know that a Snickers bar is not healthy for me compared to eating an apple. I still choose to eat Snickers bars.
Yeah.
The fact of knowing that is not going to be the deciding factor necessarily in my behavior. It's a data point that I use to evaluate and make a decision. I have the knowledge that a Snickers is an inferior choice to an apple for my health, but I'm weighing it against all these other things, my personal pleasure, my general eating habits for the last week. Oh, is this a one time? Like there's so many other components that go into making that decision, which is so simple, other than just strictly what's true in that very basic sense. And I don't know, to me, that's how I try to think about Torah ideas. And not just in a selfish way of like, oh, I'm going to do these things and then it's good for me, but just in the sense of living in greater alignment and that you're able to just be an elevated version of yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And when you talk about the truth of the ideas of the Torah, there can be this, to me, it feels dogmatic to say, just have blind trust that it's all true.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a lack of trust in the fact that like, learn it, see what you think. I don't know. Like I'm not like here being like, accept the Torah on your heart. That's not what Judaism is about. It's like, enter the base medrash, enter the study hall, test it in your life, and you will know if it is true. And you will know, and if you feel it, if you know it or feel it or whatever, wherever your entrance is, like some people are more like mind driven, some people are more heart driven, some people are more experientially driven. So for some people it could be experiencing Shabbos and then just saying like, I choose this. Some people could be studying something and seeing the ideas as being so profound and wise. Some people it could be an emotional experience of their Judaism where that knowing is, it's not like, oh, I measured this objectively in a lab against every other form of truth. It's this knowing that you have either intellectually, emotionally, or experientially where you just say, this is true.
Yes.
Is that objective truth? Does it have to be? The ideas are alive in your life and in the world, and they prove themselves.
I agree. I view it as a feedback loop where it's like, the more I learn, the more I'm able to understand what it is that I am doing and how it's affecting the spiritual reality. At the same time, the more I do, the more I'm able to understand the spiritual reality through engaging with it through the mitzvot. And so I just think it's one of those things where if you're not doing both, it's just hard to get the full picture. And that's the way that I measure how something is quote unquote true. I also couldn't agree with you more on this notion of faith. And Rabbi Tatz has this excellent lecture on this concept of faith versus emunah, and how inherent in emunah, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher it, but inherent in emunah is this concept of knowledge, that it's a core part of that word. And that when we translate it as faith, we have this concept of blind faith, which is turning off our rational brain and just acting in this kind of dogmatic way. Whereas Judaism is supra-rational. The idea being that you should understand it rationally, but also accept, and this is also a core idea of that has enabled the scientific method. The idea that there is a reality that extends beyond our own perception of what is rational. Quantum physics doesn't behave, like when you get to the quantum level of particles, it doesn't behave rationally the way to our kind of clunky human experience of reality perceives what is rational. And a part of what it is to be a sophisticated person is to accept that something isn't just true because you perceive it to be orderly. There is an order on microscopic and macroscopic levels that are beyond our perception. And so baked into Judaism is this idea that, yes, you should try to understand it in a way that makes sense to you, but also accept that there's so much beyond human perception, and that you're really limiting yourself in this very kind of like, I'm sorry, but anti-intellectual and like very like low IQ way to say that if I can't see it, I can't touch it, I can't perceive it myself, then it must be garbage. We wouldn't have any of modern science if that's how we thought. It's just not, it's not sophisticated. And it's something that I find very interesting is people are very comfortable with that idea when it comes to science, but then when it comes to Torah and religion, for some reason there's a block where it's like, well, if God is real, then show me. And it's like, you don't say that about atoms.
Can I be devil's advocate for a second?
Please, go for it.
I love that you said that. And I think that the reason why people feel suspicious of it within religion or within Judaism is because people need to come to that on their own.
Yes, that's true.
And that's like, I think one of the main ideas is that experience of, I recognize there needs to be a lot of inherent trust in a person's ability to choose in that conversation about blind faith. Blind faith is not blind faith as in a negative light. Like, I'm not saying that with a negative impression on it, but that concept of recognizing that I don't understand everything about life or the world, truth, reality, that I'm able to be super rational. There's something transcendent that I can tap into. That's not something that is imposed on a person. That is something that a person senses, intuits, and chooses for themselves when they are exposed. And there has to be a bridge to getting there, to where you make that decision to lean into this experience of faith. A lot of it has to do with like maturity. And I think that spiritual maturity has to develop from the beginning of your serious interaction with divine wisdom. Your serious interaction with Torah is a spiritually immature time. That's when you begin. You are supposed to question. You do not need to enter with blind faith. As you mature, so much of wisdom to me is humility for all that you don't know. As you begin to interact with wisdom, I think what naturally either descends on you or that what you naturally choose is this faith that you describe. One, because you start to see how much I don't know. And two, because you start to recognize, I can choose to recognize the this as my own, as something that matters. And I'll like explain what I mean by that. I think of this relationally. People are obsessed with the concept of like, do you have one soulmate? Is this your one soulmate? And the idea that you choose to identify with this person as the only one for you. That's a choice that mature people make. Not because you could technically only marry one human in the world, but you choose that this is the one for me.
Yeah.
And I think that the same thing is true with Judaism. Like that part of that maturing process is either like just the infinite wisdom arouses this innate awe, or I think it's also a very legitimate form of simple faith to say, I choose simple faith. I choose simplicity. I choose transcendence. And the choice doesn't minimize the extent of that faith because you recognize, yes, I choose. And if I chose to exit this belief, it would no longer exist to me. And that's true too. And like, I can live with that because life is complicated.
It reminds me, do you know that meme where it has like an IQ chart and it's like the stupid person and then the middle person and the sophisticated person, and it like goes like this?
No.
The idea being that like, or it also have one with like income where they'll talk about like one iteration of this meme is like the like poorest person will say like, what's important in life is family. And then the person in the middle will be like, my mortgage, my this, my da, 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 da. And then the very wealthiest person says the exact same thing as the poorest person, which is the only thing that really matters in life is family. And it's like you had to get through that whole hump. It's like a very common meme on X, but I think there's like a deep wisdom in it.
For sure.
What I would say is we're telling people to just skip from that low point to the high point without going through the middle.
Yes.
To me, that's what's wrong. When I think about in my own, to have this, to come back and play devil's advocate to myself and take the sympathetic position is I was not presented with a sophisticated vision of Jewish ideas. I had to seek it out for myself. When you're ending your Jewish education at 13 is when your mind is just opening.
Yeah.
Most American children are learning just the Peshat, which is like the basic explanation, the most obvious, read the plain text as it is version of Torah. They're not learning it's literally what Ashlag talks about as the problem of why there's a disintegration of faith in the modern world, is that we're not focused on the sod, on the secrets. We're not focused on this very profound outer edge of what we can rationally understand. That's how I view sod, is it's pushing the boundaries between the rational and the transcendent. It's the edge of what we can still grasp and understand from our perspective as humans, but it's also enough to see that there's so much that lies beyond that we cannot understand. And when you're pushed to that boundary, that's when you can accept again the simple transcendent view. But if you're not seeing that point, you're not really coming to it from an authentic place. It's just from a place of dogma and blind acceptance, which obviously I'm not a fan of. If I had to say I'm like not a fan of any one thing, it's dogma. And unfortunately, that's the place a lot of people land in their experience of what they think religion is, because they're not having this experience of the rational expansiveness.
I actually love that you brought in that arc of the poorest person and the richest person, and that you have to like, and if you're kind of somewhere in the middle, then it's like work and ambition and success and money and whatever it is, because I think that's the core of it, which is you have to experience the sophistication and complexity of the ideas to begin to sense how little you know.
Yes.
You have to, and that will awaken you to this faith of this transcendence, whatever you want to call it. I think there's like so many ways to call it, and actually finding the appropriate language for it as an individual, I think is really key. Meaning finding your own language around your own faith, being able to understand it and just have like descriptive words to understand like, how do I identify with this concept of faith, with this concept of transcendence? I think it's like really key and important. And what was that point that you just made? Oh, and in regards to the inner parts of Torah, how the innermost parts of Torah help us touch the edge of transcendence, which helps us access that faith. It awakens, it is the deepest level of Torah, therefore it awakens the deepest level of our own souls. It is at the level of the deepest level of our souls that we are united with transcendence. And that's actually the root of our own simple faith. It's this ability to tap into the deepest parts of Torah, which awakens this transcendent part of yourself, which you choose to believe is real.
Yeah.
And that when you experience it, and when you have this sense about something beyond your life, you permit it to take shape within you and within your world, which is actually a radical act to do in a godless society.
I actually think it's why, for adults specifically, who are coming into Torah, they have to be hit with the sod first, and that the most successful activations come when you're leading with the Kabbalistic perspective. Because in a way you kind of have to trace backwards, where if you're trying to treat them like they're 11-year-olds and you're just going to build up slowly, they're already intellectually past that. They've already, by the time you're an adult, you've, in your secular education, come into contact with concepts that show you that there is a truth beyond what you can rationally perceive. Like when you take physics and you take chemistry, even, other concepts that go beyond science, you've accepted that you're not going to understand everything, and there's a humility. When you're not shown that side of Torah, you're not respecting that maturity that person has, that they're bringing to the table. And I think showing them, and I know this is true for myself, showing people that there is this outer edge, it gives them the trust in the ideas to then work their way backwards. Like for me, it was a lot of dealing with these bigger, transcendent, boundaried questions. Once I felt comfortable there, I was able to work my way back. And now I find so much meaning in the most basic mitzvot because I have the foundation of knowing that there's so much, and I accept that there's so much beyond what I can perceive from the simple action of that mitzvah. Another approach though, and I'm curious to get your perspective on this. So I think Chabad does this really interestingly, and there's a lot of approaches to this where obviously when you're studying Chassidut, you're leading with a lot of these concepts of the mystical side of Torah, but in a more approachable, practical way. At the same time, Chabad is so focused, and I love it, on this idea of just performing one mitzvah and the difference that one mitzvah can make. And also this concept that each mitzvah stands on its own, unto itself, each time it's performed as a good thing into its own right. You don't have to become a person who wraps tefillin every single day for it to mean something that today you chose to wrap tefillin. And that not only on a practical level relieves the pressure for someone who's not accustomed to that lifestyle, but it also just, to me, it enhances the beauty and shows the depth of what that mitzvah is, because if it really meant so much, then to do it once is meaningful unto itself. And you do have that kind of ineffable click of doing that thing that sometimes you just are not going to get from words, from reading a book or hearing a class. You just get that feeling from the doing and the experience that will move you and show you through the experience that there's something greater. And I'm curious to hear, like, from the Chabad perspective, how they think about these kind of like two different approaches and how they meet. Because to me, it's obvious that they meet. I'm curious to hear more about it.
That's such an interesting point. Like both the emphasis on teaching the deepest parts of Torah, teaching mystical ideas, or the way it's expressed in Hasidic thought, which is like the development of mystical ideas in one path of development, because there's many different paths of developing Jewish mysticism. I think it's this twofold belief that the mitzvah itself changes you, because the mitzvah is such an intensely connective act to your own soul that there's something innately awakening about a mitzvah. And also believing that every person's mitzvah actually has an impact on the world. So that when one person does one mitzvah, and if you can encourage that in someone, that actually has a spiritual impact on the universe.
Yeah.
So you see other people's place within creation too. And that's back to that viral clip of the Reform rabbi that was outing this like Messianic fervor, that he says leads Chabad people to do Mivtzayim, which is people taking to the streets, for example, and putting tefillin on strangers. It's not, they'll put on tefillin and then they'll become religious because they'll have an awakening of their soul. Although people do describe sometimes having that spiritual awakening through doing one act. But I believe that any human being doing a mitzvah is so profoundly important for the universe that I will take time out of my life to do it, to help them do the mitzvah.
It's so democratizing and beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And to the extent that I think that like some Hasidim truly have this perspective and this philosophy, which is like your mitzvah matters just as much as mine. And so it's not a self-centered approach to Judaism where like my divine service is what's most important and then like yours is something else. And if I have extra time, I will help you. Back to like, why do we try to cure other people's illness? Believing that we are so interconnected and that your spiritual act is just as impactful on the trajectory of creation as mine.
Yeah.
And so I will compromise parts of my life in order to support you in that, because there isn't the clearest distinction between your mitzvos and mine.
The way I see it is it deepens your ability to connect to your own spirituality because you're shedding the ego. When your mitzvah is just as important as my mitzvah, then that's tapping into source even deeper. And so I don't necessarily even view it as something that's out of step with this idea of having this healthy sense of self in that way.
Yeah, I like these.
I love it. I think it's like, I'm so moved and inspired by someone who, and people feel it too, someone who takes the time to stand on the street to make sure you shook your lulav and esrog, or that you wrapped tefillin today. Because again, it's also not about it's not coming from a place of seeking kavod. It's like, if anything, it's kind of the inverse. Like that feeling, I love watching when a rabbi is helping someone wrap tefillin, not just that they're literally helping that person perform that mitzvah, but then also the way it's celebrated. Where, for the person who's doing it, you feel so good about yourself. Like someone is celebrating you doing this. It's in a way elevating that person and their mitzvah even above the rabbi or the whoever person is helping them themselves. I just find it very, very deep. I had another personal experience with this yesterday, this idea that every mitzvah can change the world. This is such a simple one, but it really spoke to me, which is that I was watching, the Yanuka now has an English Instagram page, and he uploaded a video where he is giving a shiur, a talk, and he talks about how obeying traffic signals and traffic law is like observing a mitzvah from the Torah deoraita. Like, because if you're on your phone or you're skipping a red light, you're intentionally putting someone in the way of harm. And so every time you're obeying traffic law, you're performing a very high mitzvah. And I was driving a couple friends of mine last night from one place to another in the car, and one of my friends joked, "You stop at every stop sign." And we were in a very dead area. There were not really any cars around. And I was going like exactly to the speed limit, stopping. Not to mention I'm a mom. I'm trained to try to drive on the careful side. But I told him, I said, I just watched this video from the Anuka, and he highlighted the importance of how we should observe traffic laws. And so I'm really trying to be a model citizen here and observe traffic laws. And this person was joking with me and said, I don't necessarily stop at stop signs, but even that one little thing where it's just, and again, this is an example where it's not in this little bucket of what we think of as Jewish, but it is Jewish because it's the whole broader frame and context for, I should value not putting someone intentionally in the way of harm. Yeah. We all, 98% of human beings in society accept that as a default, healthy way to operate a society and a measure of what societal health looks like. At the point that your society isn't built on the premise that we shouldn't intentionally put another person in the way of harm, you've lost the plot. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, again, like these building blocks that we don't realize the foundation is there that's so Jewish, but it is so Jewish. And just even, I know that's a very small story, but even just this one small example where this person is now being given a reason from Torah to obey traffic laws, who knows the effects, even if, God forbid anyone I know ever gets in a car accident, everyone should have only safe drives. But even if that person influences another person who maybe otherwise would have had some kind of a reckless incident, like the idea of the ripple effect is so real. Mm-hmm. I take it very seriously. I think it's like one of the more transformative, actually Jewish ideas from my time before I was religious. Again, the word religious. Before I was more conscious of God to now is the idea that I shouldn't do something if I wouldn't want everyone to necessarily act that way.
I should copy you.
Yeah, you should really see yourself. That's what it really means to be like Bat Melech, like the daughter of a king, is you have to really think of yourself as an example and your life as a testimony to God. And so you shouldn't do things that you wouldn't want everyone else to be doing. And I think there is a tendency in a world where you don't have that kind of consciousness to just say, I'm going to just do what's good for me in this moment to get ahead, or, all the way up to bigger things and all the way down to, I'm going to get there a minute faster, so I'm just going to blow past the stop sign. Mm-hmm. Just not a healthy way to, on a micro level, to look at life. It gives you low self-esteem, that it's kind of like saying, the implicit thing you're saying is, I don't matter. And what I do doesn't matter. And then all the way up, you lose that fabric of care for one another.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something I think about a lot as something I observe as a big transformation in myself.
Wow. I actually love that example of traffic so much. And as you said, the ripple effect of being careful about something that does extend to caring for others. Meaning it's not just about your safety and the safety of everyone in the car, but it's also pedestrians and everyone on the street. And I think it really speaks to this idea that mitzvahs are tapping into this divine reality, every single experience. And it's not just mitzvahs, as you said, it's not just these divinely ordained acts, but every single opportunity is an opportunity to either act in alignment with our oneness and the divine reality or in opposition to that. I think a huge part of that is a call for us to make meaning of every moment. There's different ways of looking at Hashgacha Pratis, this concept of divine providence, that everything God does is for a reason. One is this very passive take on everything God does is for a reason, so therefore everything has this larger master plan. Or to see it as an invitation to make meaning of everything that happens in your life because you choose to believe that there is a larger picture. Now, obviously, my meaning making doesn't capture the entire picture of what is happening, but the invitation for the human being in the understanding of that idea that God has created every single part of your life for a purpose, every part of your day for a purpose, is to make meaning of your day in that way. So every single moment of your life being the opportunity to express our interconnectedness, our care for each other, and so on, is not just a description of a divine reality, but is a call for each of us to make that real, to make that true, that every moment could be divine. It only exists if we affirm that it exists. because that's how God set up the world. That like we don't live in a world where you can see so clearly that those moments of stopping at a stop sign matters to society or to anyone else, or that the way that I show up in the world is a testimony to anything other than how I want to live my life. I choose to, again, I think this is kind of like a theme that I'm going to about like that choice and that call for choice, for personal choice, the personal choice to like, I represent God. Not just because I innately represent God, but because God depends on me to choose to represent God.
Oh, that's so good. It really builds your sense of purpose and self-esteem in a very deep way. It's so interesting that you bring up this concept of time and how to spend your time. Another conversation I was having last night with a friend, my friend told me this idea that I just keep thinking about, which is that God hates nothing more than wasted time. And that it's the biggest challenge of our generation with the scrolling and the distraction, all more need for Shabbat. And this idea that you're relinquishing your free will to this point about divine providence. Every time that you choose to not be the master over your time, but instead be the passive force in your attention rather than the active force in your attention, then that's a missed opportunity for service. And when I say service, I don't just mean in our traditional sense of praying, but I mean in the service of perfecting the world and revealing clarity and revealing God. And I don't know, it really stuck with me. It's something I know I have to, for sure, time management, getting granular and back to basics is something I really have to work on. And it's helpful because just saying I shouldn't scroll on my phone, again, it's one of those things. Is it true? Yes. Is the knowledge of that truth going to stop me from scrolling on X? No. But when I have this lens of free will, the alternative ways I could be spending my time, a sense of a measuring stick to have where it's time against completion of purpose here in this world. That's a totally different way to frame your time. I have a purpose. I have a limited time to accomplish this purpose. Every time I choose to be a passive force in how I spend my time, I'm missing out on the chance to complete my purpose. Very different if you just think the reason I'm here is to just have a good time. Then who cares? You're just here to have a good time.
Right.
So you need the moral underpinning to orient this basic hierarchy of decision-making. And if you don't have it, then by what objective standard is scrolling necessarily bad? Like if you're just here to have fun, it's not bad. Maybe it's a little embarrassing, okay, or it's a little lazy, but it's not as bad as missing out on your purpose. And again, I just think it's one of those things that ties back in this very deep way to self-esteem. When you have that sense of purpose, you're connecting to that part of your soul that gives you this freedom and inherent value and wholeness and the feeling of completion and completeness versus ego, which is just, it's not going to necessarily lead you there.
Yeah. What you're describing of the antidote to that scrolling being measuring it up against completing your mission in this world. I personally don't think that that's a leap at all, because what you're really doing is you're just contextualizing the wasted time, the brain rot within its actual impact on your life. It's an idea from Sota, that from Masechah Sota, which is the Talmud, which is that the only reason why a person sins is because a spirit of folly enters him or her. And it's something that really gets explored in Hasidic thought, and specifically in the Tonia from the Alter Rebbe, is this idea that the only reason why we get disconnected from our souls is because we forget who we are. And we don't really recognize in the moment of that act how great the disconnection that we're creating is from God. And I think that example of scrolling, to make it really real, the only reason why we scroll and get far away from that part of ourselves that knows that it doesn't want to waste time is because we're not fully conscious of the long-term or real impact of what this does on my life. Meaning it's just half an hour. So that it's just half an hour is not honest. It's not real. It's an unaware of the actual impacts of this scroll on my life. Versus living with like awareness, consciousness, intention, the voice of the divine soul is recognizing the real imprint of this action on my connection with God, my connection with myself. So taking those opportunities, I find it helpful to up the stakes and recognize the stakes actually are that high.
Yes.
Like there are times in my life where like waking up early in the morning, the way that I was able to motivate myself to do that was to say, it's this or you let go of your dreams. It's this or you let go of being able to create. It's this or you let go of being able to study. And like, it might sound dramatic to some, but like at certain periods of my life where like I had a little baby at home, it was true. So like, and because I still wanted to be connected to it, I had to like really recognize that when I would wake up in the morning and I didn't want to get up, because who does early in the morning, it was like, it's this or everything you're dreaming of. Yeah. Everything you want. And like, it is that high stakes sometimes. It's dramatic.
No,
I'm sorry.
No, it's not dramatic.
I feel like it's real. Yeah.
It's real.
I don't know if it's dramatic, but like, I don't know if it's necessarily meaning like it's an intense way to live. But I think that like, if you want to live like tapped in, sometimes it requires that intensity, recognizing that like enormous impact of your own actions on your life and expression of your soul. And that example of scrolling is a perfect one where like you have to root back into like what's actually at stake here. It's not this next hour. It's my clarity of mind. It's my purpose in this world. It's the life I want to live. That's what's at stake. That is a little bit more jolting than like, oh, it's just like a couple hours. Because a couple hours every single night is obviously like such a depreciation of a self.
I think the intensity is absolutely required.
Of course you think that. Like,
no, but I even just, and I want to frame it as just, no matter where you think of yourself on the religious spectrum, I think God consciousness has given me a healthy way to channel my intensity, where it's not about shame, it's about purpose. It also allows, at least for me, it's allowed me to let go of, my biggest problem is I make the perfect the enemy of the good, but that's just really ego of wanting the honor of something making me look good versus having the view that any little thing I do that's revealing light is already great. It's already perfect.
Already perfect.
And you can't hold back based on that, again, rational, objective measure. You have to go supra-rational.
Yeah.
When I say, I don't like how I look, sound, whatever in this thing, in this context, whatever it is, small or big, and I choose to do it anyway, that is supra-rational. You're accepting that there is a greater game at stake, that if I don't engage, I've knocked back points. Whereas if it's really just as small as making your ego look and feel good, then the table stakes just aren't that high and you're forever held back by the shame of your ego. And so I think it's actually very healthy. I don't think it's bad. I think the alternative is very unhealthy. And I think it's what's led, when you look in general at young people in America, and there's this critique that they're kind of struggling to get started with life. They're not getting their driver's licenses. They're not dating. They're not getting married. They're not holding as many jobs. I do think a lot of it has to do with this intense attachment to this necessity for perfection at the expense of the good. But it's from this place of not being tapped in to the soul. That's how I see it.
Yeah. I love that you reflected that. And I agree that it can be driven by purpose and not shame. And also clarity, like driven by clarity of who you are, clarity of what you need. Meaning it's not going to be the same across the board, what we each need to, or what we each can, because I don't think that this thought process necessarily works for everyone, but what we each can experience, that clarity of the stakes, what we each can experience as being high stakes. It depends on you as an individual, what your divine soul is, being tapped into what you need. But if there is something that to others may seem like a stretch or like a sacrifice or ridiculous, like if you told me that like even an hour of screen time a day was too much for you because it muddled your mind and made you unable to be productive, some others might be like, be compassionate with yourself, Charlotte, it's fine. But I would say, Charlotte, if that makes you muddled and unable to do the work that you want to do, then I don't think it's extreme to figure out how to recognize, how to implement preventing that high stakes scroll.
It's literally the resurrection of the dead theme.
Okay. Why?
Giving up the attachment to that, whatever that comfort or habit is that isn't serving the bigger purpose.
And your soul.
And the idea isn't to give up comfort and that comfort's inherently bad and that being Spartan is good. The idea is that you will find authentic comfort, joy, satisfaction when you are acting in alignment with your soul. So it's not so much about those things inherently being bad. It's that they can become negative when they're obstacles to the greater purpose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's acknowledging that certain vices have a really high cost and certain vices don't. But if you can identify certain vices in your life that have a really high cost, then that is not, and it's not an anti-comfort perspective or anti-pleasure or anti-having a positive life, but it's more about shedding coping mechanisms, shedding vices that don't serve us, shedding vices that muddle and cloud us.
Something Gedalia Fenster says that I find so interesting is that a way to understand vices is that they're all about receiving. And the sacrifice that you undergo, like this ego death, is about giving up this desire to receive for the self alone that's inherently in the vice. And the way he connected it very interestingly to drug and alcohol use is just this idea of wanting to receive the light, but in a way that's kind of like more easily accessible than, obviously it's hard to your point, you wake up, you study, there's a discipline that has to go to receiving that light versus, you drink or you take the drugs and then you have the comfort. Very different from the comfort of building a happy marriage, which again, all this work that has to go into being the kind of person to attract the right partner and then to creating a partnership that's healthy and all very different. And so when you're tapping out of just being a receiver and you're tapping into being a giver, that shift itself is what helps you get over the vices. Like that's the inherent deeper truth. Not just like, alcohol is bad or like this is bad or that's bad. Do you know what I mean?
I love that you said that, especially in the conversation around phones. And it fits right into Ashlag's concept of giving and receiving and what it means to like actually take pleasure in giving, where like you receive pleasure from the giving itself and that you desire to receive just because God wants to give to you. Because one of the I think one of the main struggles with our phones, or all of our vices, honestly, is wanting to receive dopamine without working for it. The amount of effort that you put in correlates to how long the impact of that dopamine will be sustained in your life. It's building the vessel.
That's the way I like, because you have to think,
Love that
what's
language.
the day after when you drink? Do you have a hangover because you couldn't hold that light? When you work out, not only do you get that dopamine, but then you actually get in better shape.
Yeah.
Like there's this whole, that you're building the vessel.
Yeah.
And there's a pleasure in the building of the vessel itself. And then also, and having the effect, but then there's also a pleasure in the work that it takes to have the effect, which is like the exercising itself.
Yeah.
Like there's a value in having the fit body, and then there's a value in actually doing the exercise. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think eventually you start to enjoy the actual work itself.
Yes, exactly.
Not just the post high.
Yes.
Or the after effects.
Yes.
Yeah. And that, by the way, I think this is a beautiful way to end. That's our work in this world, is to fall in love with that process of building the vessel. It's not yes, we're moving towards a vision. Yes, it's all going to be revealed to us. Yes, we're creating a brighter future. And also fall in love with the process of the work of creating that vessel. This is what it means to be alive, is to be moving and working and growing and creating a vessel for a brighter divine light. And if we can fall in love with the process of the work while, staying attuned to what we're creating, I think we can really live enriched lives.
Amen.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. It's been a pleasure.
Always such a joy. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you so much for coming. It was so much fun.
It was really spectacular.
Yeah.